Welcome to Section 3, Video 8, Creating the Player's HUD Part 3, Connecting the Player Character with the HUD. In this video we are going to connect the player character to the HUD class and prepare the death and pause functionality. First we are going to set up the connection to our HUD class in our player character header file. Here we are declaring a pointer variable to the generic HUD class so that we can use it later in the source file, but only in C++, which is why we put it in the private category. We have uProperty above it so that way it can be garbage collected in the event that we need it to be garbage collected. Here we are declaring our functions for pausing and unpausing the game that we can also call in Blueprint. Here we are declaring and overriding an inherited function that is called when a controller takes control of a pawn. This is either when it is controlled by the player controller or when an AI controller takes over this pawn. Let's create our definitions of these functions. Now that we've created our definitions, let's go into our source file and start adding some code. Here we are adding our library for the generic HUD so that way we can call the specific functions within it. Here in our constructor, we are setting our default value for the HUD reference variable to a null pointer. Since this is an inherited function, in the possessed_by function, we are calling up the chain for the possessed_by function in any inherited functions. Then we check to see if the new controller is a player controller, while at the same time saving a temporary variable from that check if it is valid. So first it'll do this cast, which will check to see if the new controller is a player controller or an AI controller. If it is a player controller, then we save it as a temporary variable and then continue on through the function. If it is not, then we will skip over the if statement. Then we try to get the generic HUD from our HUD class for this player controller, which is a general default sort of function that is automatically supplied with a reference when it is spawned in the game mode. If we did get a successful reference to the HUD class, then we tell it to show the gameplay HUD class by calling the function showSpecificMethod. If we did get a successful reference to the HUD class, then we tell it to show the gameplay HUD class by calling the function showSpecificMenu and inputting the gameplay HUD class getter function, which is one of the getters that we set up earlier in that class, and then telling it to use only the game mode for our input mode and don't show the mouse. In our pause game function, we are attempting to get the player controller the same way we did with the possessed_by function and then saving it as a temporary variable, then checking if our HUD reference variable is valid, or if it's invalid, then we try to cast and get it again. And then we do the check again to see if it is valid. If it is valid, then we show the specific menu, which is our pawn menu, which will fail because we haven't set this yet, and we will do this in the future. But it is good to set this up now. Then, while using the player controller reference that we locally saved earlier, we are telling it to pause the game and then inputting the true value, which will turn pause of the game. And if you put in false, then it would unpause the game. Here in the unpause game function, we are doing the same thing that we did with pause game, but in a different sort of order of operations, where we unpause the game, then we check if our HUD reference is invalid as a sort of check and sort of edge case, which means this may not happen, but just in case, let's do this anyway. And then tell it to show our gameplay HUD class, which will succeed because we have already set this. Now we are finally starting on death implementation, which isn't finished, which we will fill out the rest of in the future, but right now we are just setting up the menus for it. So we are checking to see if our HUD reference is invalid. If it is invalid, then we try to get the player controller and then try to get the HUD reference from that. But if it is valid, then we just skip over this if statement, check if this is valid, and then show the specific game menu, which is the dead menu class, which we will also set up in the future. Let's save all, and then compile our code by going to Build, Rebuild, Project, and let's jump back into the Unreal Editor and hit play to test this. As you can see, we can shoot, we can move around, we can jump. While holding the shift key, we can sprint, and releasing it stop sprinting. To turn off infinite ammo, let's go to our blueprints, in our player character blueprint. In our class defaults, under the gun category, ammo, let's uncheck unlimited ammo, save and compile, hit play, and as you can see when we fire, our ammo counter goes down. And now we cannot fire anymore. In summary, for this section we have created the player character's code and created the player's HUD. In the next section, we will be creating gameplay elements.